Of course, the new Hasselblad X2D Mark II is better than its predecessor. But the question I kept getting after my first review was, is it better enough to justify the upgrade? While preparing my full setup guide for both cameras, I ran through every single menu item and found 25 differences between the X2D and the X2D Mark II. I've used both cameras extensively, and in this video I'll show you which of the new features I use in real-world shooting, which ones don't really matter, and which parts make the new model worse for my style of work. So let's dive straight in. By the way, if you want to see how I set up every menu for both cameras to get the highest image quality and most efficient workflow, check out my in-depth setup tutorial linked in the description. Let's start with the 6 upgrades that really matter. The ones that truly improved my everyday work with this camera. Of course, we have to start with the new continuous autofocus. Yes, Hasselblad finally introduced AFC, and it is actually really solid. I use it with the newer V and E lenses, and the hit rate is excellent. Subject tracking is smooth, responsive, and works well for portraits, events, and even a bit of wildlife. Okay, it's not Sony level, but it doesn't need to be. For a camera like this, it's very capable and more than enough for most real-world shooting. The new LiDAR sensor isn't something I rely on for most shoots, because my subjects are usually too far away for it. But when I shoot close-ups or low-light scenes, it adds a layer of precision I didn't have before. It's a nice upgrade, subtle but helpful, and it's another step towards making this camera more versatile. And then there's the new joystick. I honestly didn't expect to care much about it. But now I use it all the time. Moving the AF point, navigating the menus, zooming into images. It's very fast and more tactile. Yes, of course, you could do all of that with the touchscreen or buttons before. But it's a bit quicker and simply more enjoyable to use. It's one of those things that once you get used to it, you won't want to go back. The new rear screen custom button is very useful in combination with the new AF modes. I've assigned it to quickly change the focus zone and subject type. On the original X2D, I never really touched these settings. Now with AFC in play, I switch between a wide focus area for AFC and spot focus for AFS all the time. It's fast, intuitive, and a perfect example of how small changes can have a big impact on the user's experience. Then there's the redesigned rear screen. Finally, the tilt screen clears the EVF. That was one of my biggest pain points with the original X2D. Now I can shoot waist level compositions without the screen being blocked. It tilts further, feels sturdy, and just makes sense. The added ability to tilt downwards is something I don't use every day, but I'm glad it's there. It makes the X2D feel like a more complete tool. The added feature of auto screen brightness sounds minor, but it solves a real problem. I often misjudged exposure because the screen was either too bright at night or too dim in sunlight. These are the features I truly love. They're exactly the kind of refinements that make a great camera system even better. Now let's move on to the features I use occasionally, the nice-to-haves that aren't essential but still worth mentioning. The lighter weight is one of those changes. The X2D weighs 730 grams compared to 790 on the original. That's always welcome, of course, but in real-world shooting, I honestly can't feel a difference. The grip has a new texture and it's slightly more grippy. It looks a bit strange at first, but after a few days I got used to it and now I kind of like it. Same goes for the dark Hasselblad logo. It's subtle, stealthy, and more understated. A small design touch, but one that fits the character of the camera really well. The front control wheel is now clickable. I've assigned it to depth of field preview. It's nice to have, but I don't use it that often. When customizing the buttons, the new menu interface shows you a visual layout of the camera. It's helpful, especially if you're new to the system. But it's also something you set once and then forget about it. Technically, the base ISO is now 50 instead of 64. That gives you about 1/3 of a stop more headroom. But in practice, it doesn't change how I shoot or expose. Dynamic range has been improved too. The X2D Mark II is rated at 15.3 stops, compared to the 15 stops on the X2D. I can't really see a difference in the edit, but I'll never complain about more flexibility in post. The new screen is definitely brighter. 1400 nits peak brightness instead of 800. Preview images look punchier and more accurate. It's better calibrated and easier to view in direct sunlight. That's great, although the old screen was already excellent. Then there's the new HDR mode with Hive and JPEGs. It's not something I use professionally, but for casual family shoots it can be convenient. Just keep in mind, HDR mode has some limitations. For example, you can't use it in manual mode, you can't use flash with it, and you can't use your electronic shutter, and spot metering is also disabled. Personally, I prefer creating HDRs from RAW files, and that works just as well on the original X2D. I'll be releasing a separate video on how to get the most out of HDR photography with Hasselblad, so make sure you're subscribed if that's something you want to explore. Alright, let's talk about the features that, in my experience, don't really matter. They may look good in a spec sheet, but for my workflow, they make no difference. Take the new 3.5mm remote control port. I never use it. I prefer the in-camera self-timer for long exposures. That said, if you're shooting scenes where precise timing is absolutely critical, and you want to avoid any kind of camera shake, it might still be useful to some of you. The microphone port has been replaced by an AF assist light. That's actually better, because you couldn't really use the mic before anyway. Still, I don't photograph close-up subjects in the dark, so I haven't used the light so far. Continuous shooting speed dropped slightly from 3.3 frames per second down to 3 frames. Autofocus point count went from 294 up to 425. That sounds like a big leap, but when I'm shooting, I don't see or feel a meaningful change in accuracy or coverage. Maybe it helps with the overall performance of the great continuous autofocus though. Self-timer now has a blinking LED and can shoot up to 5 consecutive frames. I don't use this feature, but I can see how that might help with group shots. Take 3 or 5 frames and Photoshop in the closed eyes of your relatives later. One small annoyance, if you're shooting RAW plus compressed files, the minimum interval for interval shooting increased from 2 seconds on the X2D to 5 seconds on the X2D Mark II. I don't shoot JPEGs or Hives for time-lapse sequences, so this doesn't affect me when capturing RAW time-lapses. But it is a step backwards. Image stabilization is one of those things that was already great on the original X2D, and has been pushed even more in the marketing of the X2D Mark II. In real-world scenarios, the new model might give me 2/3 of a stop more. Maybe. Always keep an eye on the edge sharpness of your photos, as camera shake is much more visible in these areas compared to the center of the image. You can now wake up the camera remotely through the Focus app. It's a neat idea, but I haven't used it in the past 6 months. One real issue though, manual flash control doesn't currently work with my Pro Photo lights. When I set the flash to manual mode, the camera overrides it and forces its own exposure compensation settings. This needs to be fixed, as it makes flash photography almost unusable, especially when using more than one flashlight at a time. Currently, I'm talking with the Hasselblad technical service about this problem and update you as soon as I get some news. Please tell me in the comments down below if you had other experiences with this situation and if it's the same for other flash manufacturers. Let's talk about what I'd love to see next from Hasselblad. Because while the X2D Mark II is a strong update, there is still some room to grow. First, the tilt screen is great, but it only works in landscape orientation. If you're shooting verticals or want to work low with the camera in portrait mode, there's no tilt option. Either a fully articulating screen or a tilting mechanism like the Fujifilm's three-way design would be a great addition. Or, and this might be really quirky, give us a Hasselblad 500 series style square sensor with horizontal and vertical crop overlays. Yeah, that might be something. An internal black and white mode would be a welcome addition too. I know, Hasselblad's natural color solution is awesome, but a well-designed, high dynamic range black and white simulation with a fine-tuned contrast curve would be such a lovely addition for all the monochrome shooters out there to get a good feel for the image in live view. Every camera manufacturer has it, and I'd love to see Hasselblad's elaborate take on it. We also need better compression options. The 100 megapixel RAWs are massive and not always necessary. Offering lower resolution capture modes at 50 or 25 megapixel with increased dynamic range, similar to what Leica offers, would make the system so much more flexible. Or even just lossless compression for the full 100 megapixel files would be a nice addition. There are also some software tricks that I'd like to see that Phase 1 uses to great effect. Frame averaging, for example, lets you shoot long exposures in daylight without any ND filters. Dual Exposure Plus protects highlights by blending in a second underexposed image. And a true ETTR, exposed to the right mode, could help maximize dynamic range while avoiding highlight clipping. These are some features that truly help in high-end commercial workflows, and they'd fit perfectly in Hasselblad's toolset. Another major point, the sensor readout speed still isn't fast enough to fully unlock the potential of the electronic shutter, especially when using third-party lenses. Faster readout would make silent shooting and adapting lenses viable in more situations by reducing rolling shutter. This could open up entirely new use cases. Give us the ability to customize the AEL and AFD buttons. They are sitting there, fixed in their function, and that feels like a missed opportunity. And we are still waiting desperately for Capture One support. It's still the gold standard for tethered shooting and RAW processing in many professional studios. Without it, Hasselblad is cutting itself off from a big part of the pro community. But beyond individual features, I think Hasselblad needs to make a clear decision. Who is the system really for? If you want to appeal to enthusiasts, give them more simulation modes, built-in resizes, lower res RAWs, and maybe even digital zooming for casual shooting. If your target is professionals, lean into the precision tools. Things like RAW histograms, faster sensor readouts, and clever exposure control systems that help protect image quality in every scenario. Both directions are valid, but right now it feels like Hasselblad is not showing us a real identity, and that makes the system feel a bit scattered. A focused roadmap could make it truly exceptional for whichever audience they choose. Before we get to my final verdict on whether you should upgrade from the X2D to the X2D Mark II, please take a second to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Over 90% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet, and while it's a small click for you, it makes a real difference for me as a creator and helps this channel grow. You'll find a link down in the description below. Let's recap this video. There are 7 features I genuinely love in the new X2D Mark II, 9 more that I use regularly, and 9 that I mostly ignore or that even made things slightly worse. That's actually a decent haul for what's technically a minor Mark II update. If there's one standout reason to move from the original X2D to the X2D Mark II, it's the vastly improved autofocus system. Continuous AF, better subject detection, more reliable low-light performance, and more intuitive control through the new joystick. If you shoot fast-moving subjects, portraits, events, kids, even the occasional wildlife, this new AF system alone could be reason enough to upgrade. But keep in mind, it only works with the new V series, E series, and the 28p or 75p lenses. If you're using older XCD glass, AFC won't be a reason to upgrade if you don't want to switch out your whole lens lineup. For my own work, which is mainly architecture, landscapes and fine art, autofocus speed is rarely a limiting factor. So for me personally, the most meaningful upgrade is the redesigned tilt screen. It now clears the EVF and can finally angle downward. Small details, but they make a difference in the way I use this camera. Still, I wouldn't upgrade my entire system just for that. At the end of the day, the features I love, use or ignore might be different from yours. But I hope this breakdown helped you better understand what the X2D Mark II actually improves and what stays the same. And honestly, now might be the perfect time to look for a used X2D. Plenty of photographers are selling theirs to buy the new model. So if you're upgrading from an X1D or entering the Hasselblad system for the first time, you might just find a great deal on this. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have fun shooting.